Today we're going to discuss the senseless murders of 4 Idaho college students. They were murdered in off-campus housing. What really happened there? Well, we're going to talk about that and a whole lot more on this episode of Charlie Crime Buster. What some people are calling, well, they're calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting. Well, hello and welcome to today's podcast. Well, today we're going to be discussing the Idaho student murders. Now, my friend, it's never a good time to lose loved ones, but our hearts especially go out to the families of these fine young college students who needlessly lost their lives in this horrific crime. We all do know that the holiday season for them, well, it's going to be a really, really difficult one. So let's take a moment and remember them in our prayers. Now, before we get into our focused story today, I want to welcome all of you to the podcast. Now, I guess if you were here personally, I'd say pull up a chair, sit down, let's talk about these terrible murders. But this is the digital world now, and I have the privilege of saying welcome to you from all over the world, actually, because we have other countries that listen to the podcasts. We get excited to know that there are more listeners that are joining with us every week. And the thousands of downloads, well, it encourages us to continue to investigate and to share these stories with you. Hey, if you'd like to ask questions or maybe give suggestions or maybe just say hi, you can reach me by emailing me at charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Maybe you'd like to become a part of our support family. You can support us by going to peacemakernetwork.com. That's peacemakernetwork.com. There you can become a badge, B-A-D-G-E supporter, badge supporter for as little as $3 a month. And hey, you not only help this podcast to go forward, but you will also be able to help us as we support law enforcement, first responders, and the military, the real heroes of life out there. Hey, you can read all about it. You can become a part of it. peacemakernetwork.com. Now, we're going to leave these links in the show notes, so if you didn't get that right now, you can go right to the show notes, click on the link, and you can get right there. Well, to our focus today, we're going to be talking about these 4 students, college students, that were murdered. They're in off-campus housing. I'm going to share with you a little bit about them because I made up my mind not too long ago that when we covered these stories, we're certainly going to take time to let you know about the victims. You see, these victims are much more than just names on some cast note that you might see of a movie or some sort of Lifetime movie or some sort of special on television. These are real people. They have real family. One of the victims was a young lady by the name of Xana Cornodo. She was 20 years of age. She was from Post Falls, Idaho. She was a junior. She majored in marketing. She was a member of one of the sororities there on campus. Her sister, Jasmine Cornodo, she said that Xana was so happy and loved, it just breaks my heart. Went on to describe Xana as lighthearted. Said she always lifted up a room. And Jasmine said she made me such a proud big sister. She says, I wish I could have had more time with her. She had so much life left to live. And her Instagram had all kinds of photos. And she was especially proud of her boyfriend, a second victim by the name of Ethan Chapin, C-H-A-P-I-N. He was 20 years of age. He was from Mount Vernon, Washington. He was a first-year student majoring in recreation, sport, and tourism management. That's what the university said. He was also a member of a fraternity. Chapman now, he was actually a triplet. He recently celebrated his birthday with his siblings back in late October. His mother, a young lady by the name of Stacy Chapman, she told King 5 that her son was a comedian of the family. He loved country music, and he loved sports. That was Ethan Chapman. We have two others that are victims. One by the name of Madison Mogen, M-O-G-E-N. They called her Maddie. She was a senior there from Idaho. She was majoring in marketing. She was also a member of a sorority. Now, Mogen and her friend, Canolo, they both worked at the Mad Greek restaurant in Moscow. In a statement on Facebook, that business, the Mad Greek restaurant, they announced that they would be shutting down temporarily to grieve. And they talked about Xana and Maddie. Xana and Maddie both were servers there for several years. They brought a lot of joy to the restaurant, all those that they encountered. And they, of course, mentioned how much they would miss her. The next victim is a young lady by the name of Kaylee Gonsalves, of 21 years of age. Kaylee was a senior from Rathdrum, Idaho. She was majoring in general studies. She was also a member of Alpha Phi. That's what Today reported. And her sister, Olivia, said she had everything going for her, absolutely everything. She had a job lined up. She worked really hard for it. She had trips planned. And they, of course, shared a lot of photos of all of them on Instagram. Well, we're going to talk about what really happened to these four precious students in a moment. But right now, it's time for what we call our Crazy Crook story. We try to share a Crazy Crook story. It kind of lightens the load of some of this heavy stuff that we cover. And this one is a crazy crook indeed, and he's from Missouri. He actually pleaded guilty to robbing a local Bank of America branch. Now get this, he used a demand note. Wait for it. A demand note for this money that he was robbing this bank from was written on the back of his own birth certificate. Yeah, you heard it right. He wrote the demand note on the back of his birth certificate. It gets even crazier because this guy was actually already wearing an ankle monitor related to a previous case. Talking about being able to put him at the scene of the crime, well, that device easily placed him at the scene. It was on Wednesday back in July of this year, approximately 11:30 a.m., an unknown white male wearing a gray cut-off T-shirt, blue gym shorts, an orange shoe on his right foot. Can't be too obvious, can we? He entered the Bank of America located at 633 West Kearney in Springfield, Missouri. He had multiple tattoos on his left and right arms, and this crazy crook, well, he approached the teller, presented a note written on a white piece of paper with a pink marker, and it said, "Give me your money now. Don't say anything. I have a partner outside." Well, they grabbed the money from the teller drawers, gave it to him, handed him the money, they took the money and the note, and he turned away, and he exited the west entrance of the Bank of America. But while fleeing the scene, I guess he got scared. He thought, well, maybe it wasn't a wise thing for me to do this, so then the crazy crook, he threw out the note that demanded the money. But remember now, this note was written on the back of his own birth certificate. He also got scared and started throwing the money out as well. Well, it's no wonder that this crazy crook got caught. A crazy crook who didn't have enough sense to write a note on some other paper other than his birth certificate, and then threw it out the window where it could be found easily, along with the money that he had just robbed from the Bank of America. This crazy crook is indeed Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Well, now back to our main focus. This is how it all went down. Here's kind of a timeline of the crime. On Saturday, November the 12th, well, we found that Gonsalves, well, she posted a cheerful picture on Instagram, posing with four friends, smiling proudly, and it appeared to be taken on the porch of the house, all four of the victims. A picture, and she said this in the caption, "One lucky girl to be surrounded by these people every day." Now that night, both her and Ethan Mogen, well, they hung out at a bar called the Corner Club in town. while Chapman and Cornola, well, they went to a party together at the Pratt House on the campus. So we have two of them going there to the corner club bar, and then Chapman and his girlfriend Cornola, they went to a party at the Pratt House at the campus. Now, on Sunday, November the 13th, there were two of the victims, the one who went to the bar. They were also captured at a video at 1:41 a.m. near a food truck. That was a clip posted on Twitch, an online platform for live streaming. The friends were standing in line at the Grub Wondering Kitchen's food truck. That was also called the Grub Truck, as they chatted with friends. While they were there was an unidentified man who appeared to be walking with him. He stood nearby while they ordered. But now, police said on November the 20th that man in the white sweatshirt seen talking to them, he's not a suspect. He's been ruled out. Police said initially that they all returned home around 1:45 a.m. However, they did later to say that they revised the statement that said that Mogan and Goncalves actually arrived at 1:56 a.m. That was based on evidence that was actually taken from a doorbell camera right next to the residence. Now, they had also received a ride back from, quote, a private party. The police did not name them, just called them a private party. But they said that this person who gave them a ride was also ruled out as a suspect. Now, two of the female roommates, the ones that survived the attack, there were 6 people in the house, they've also been cleared as suspects. They returned home from their night out before the 4 friends did. They returned home around 1 a.m. Now, the 4 victims were stabbed to death with an edged weapon, such as a knife. Police are saying anywhere between 3 and 5 a.m. And that murder weapon, my friend, has not yet been found. But at 11:58 the next day, well, a person called 911. He was one of the surviving roommates' phones was used, actually. But another person had called 911, a friend of the surviving roommate. And they reported what they called, quote, unquote, an unconscious person. Then at 2 p.m. Sunday, well, the university, they sent out a vandal alert, notifying students of the homicides and told students to shelter in place. But just 1 hour later, that order was lifted. Police called it a quadruple homicide. And they also said it was a, quote, now get this, isolated, targeted attack, posing, quote, no imminent threat to the community at large. Now, let's take a moment, let's talk about the crime scene. You see, this is a place where most of the evidence will be collected in this grisly murder of all 4 students that were stabbed to death. You see, these students were killed in their rental house just off campus on King Road. They're in Moscow, Idaho. The area is home to the Idaho University College. It's a small town of about 26,000 people. The town borders to Washington State. It's around 80 miles south of Spokane, Washington. It's only 9 miles, though, from Pullman, Washington, which is the home of the Washington State University. And by the way, this is the first murder in 7 years in this small town. A small town that is considered safe by many. Well, at least it was until this unthinkable murder of these 4 college students. Now, the house that they were killed in, it was a split-level house. The bottom door could be entered from the front of the house, and this was the floor where 2 of the students were left unharmed. And now it should also be said that there was a dog staying with the students by the name of Murphy, was a golden doodle. That dog was also unharmed. Now, that's important to note because of the investigation side, which we're going to talk about a little later in the podcast. Now, it is believed that the perpetrator or perpetrators entered from the back side. That would be going up to the 2nd level of the house. There were wraparound porch-like. It's reported that the suspect probably got entry through a sliding glass door there. And there were 2 bedrooms on each of the floors. And according to reports, now get this, there were, quote, no sign of forced entry. However, may I add, you can gain entry into most sliding glass doors without even leaving a sign of a forced entry. Now, the house had also been described by neighbors as sort of a party house with lots of coming and going. Not in a wild sort of way, but lots of music and people coming and going, though they said that the people were most respectful. There was actually a code that you used to enter the lock on the front door, and people said that code was probably common knowledge among many. And, my friend, at the crime scene there was lots of blood in this horrible slaughter of these 4 students. In fact, so much blood that in one of the pictures of the house, you can actually see blood seeping through the walls. Those close to the scene, well, they stated the killer was sloppy. So for days upon days, the investigators were analyzing the scene. More than 100 items of evidence was logged, over 4,000 photos taken there at the scene. It was reported that the victims were not gagged, they were not tied up, and that they were probably stabbed in their beds in the upper body as they were sleeping. Coroner said at least one, maybe more, had defensive wounds from attempting to fight back. Now, throughout the investigations, authorities have always said that they believed that this was a targeted attack. They say that because of what they saw at the scene, and the fact that 2 of the victims were not attacked that night. However, they're not revealing what it was at the scene that makes them think that it was a targeted attack. Now, investigators were observed at the scene taking photos of tire tracks, looking beyond the house into the woods behind the residence. Coroner did state that the wounds were from a large military-like knife, like a bar knife, and investigators were checking the area to see where such knives like this may have been sold. Now, before we get into the investigation itself, let me tell you what investigators have ruled out, the people that they have ruled out, and they have revealed that to the public. First, they ruled out the 2 students who were unharmed on the first floor of the house. Many people wonder how they could have slept through it, but remember, they were separated. It was kind of like in a basement. And a knife, well, it kills people, but it doesn't leave a shot sound like from a gun. So they ruled out the 2 students who were unharmed on the first floor. They also ruled out any of the victims of the crime. Yep, according to investigators, it was not a, quote, murder-suicide. They also ruled out the person seen with the 2 victims at the food truck that we told you about later or earlier in the podcast. They've also ruled out the private party that drove 2 of the victims back home. And they ruled out an ex-boyfriend. An ex-boyfriend who, interestingly enough, was called 6 or 7 times that night, but did not answer because he was asleep at home at the time. And they do not believe, according to reports, that this case is linked to 2 additional murders in the state. Additional murders where people were killed with a knife and had certain characteristics similar. And it might interest you to know that they ruled out the fact that there was a pet, a dog, that was skinned in the area prior to the murders. A couple had let their dog out to go to the restroom or to relieve itself, but that dog never returned, and then when they found it, it had been literally skinned with a knife. There was also a rabbit in the area that was mutilated. And investigators, well, they've said that they cannot see any ties of this murder to those incidents. You may recall that there was a dog that was left unharmed at the murder scene. So ruling out people and with 1,000 pieces of evidence logged, then let me ask you a question. Why has this investigation not come up with a suspect? Well, we're going to tell you about that in just a moment. But now it's time for our Courageous Citizen of the Week story. This is a former Army Major, Richard Fierro. You see, he never thought he would need to use the combat skills he learned in military while he was out on a night out with his family. But that's exactly what happened Saturday, some time ago, a few weeks ago, as Fierro, his wife and daughter, and his daughter's boyfriend and family and friends were at Club Q in Colorado Springs. They were there celebrating birthday, watching a drag show. Well, shots rang out in this LGBTQ nightclub just before midnight. And he went on to say, I went to the ground as soon as I heard the rounds. That's what Fierro said. This is, by the way, President Joe Biden had called to him to thank him for his heroism of that day. Well, the veteran who served 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan, he said, well, his training just kicked in. He said, I was in, quote, fighting mode. I was doing what I did down range. I trained for this. After hitting the ground, he saw a man with a gun. He jumped into action, ran across the room, pulled him down, and there Fierro and a guy by the name of Thomas James. They were identified as 2 club goers who helped take down the suspected gunman. By the way, 5 people were killed, 17 were wounded, but many more would have been killed and many more wounded, if not for the heroic actions of Fierro. Now, Fierro, as most of these kind of courageous citizens said, he said it hurts to think about those who will never get to go home, as well as everyone in the building who was traumatized that night. So here they are, 2 citizens in a mass shooting who leaped to action, risked their own life to take this man down. These 2 men are indeed Charlie Crimebusters, courageous citizens of the week. Now back to our main focus and the investigation. Well, now this investigation has been criticized by many because it has not yet brought forth a suspect. It continues to withhold information from the public. You see, part of this is because of the digital world that we live in now, and because cases like this, well, they're solved in 90 minutes or less in the movies or on television. But there was another problem in the investigation that has caused criticism of the investigation. And that is how the police came out and said the crime was targeted. There was no danger to the public. However, a few days later, they took that back. And while they still maintained that the crime was a targeted crime, they did encourage the public to be vigilant, to walk in pairs, to lock the doors, to let others know when you get home. You see, my friend, that's a mixed message. And that mixed message caused the public to doubt investigators. Now, it is very common for investigators to withhold information from the public. That is to protect the integrity of the investigation and to help them catch the bad guy or guys. And in my opinion, we really can't discount the investigators for doing just that. They do it all the time. And there has been much that's been said about the fact that this is a small-town police department. Hadn't had a lot of experience at these kind of murders. And while that is true, well, the officials there do have the support and help of the state police, and they have the help of the FBI. In fact, more than 45 investigators from the FBI, state police, and local investigators are on this case. And as far as blaming the officials for a contaminated crime scene, well, my friend, I got to tell you, just about all crime scenes are contaminated in some sort of way, both in big and small towns. You see, there are people who come across the crime. They got to report the crime. And the police, they must go in and clear the area of danger. And then first responders must come in and render aid. So there's going to be some contamination of just about every single crime scene. But the local police there, my friend, they locked down the scene pretty quickly. And I believe they did as good as any large department in responding to this tragedy. And while the authorities are not revealing many things, I can assure you that the investigation is ongoing and there are plenty that they can pick up from this crime. You see, they should be able to tell which victim was killed first. You see, a large knife used in this crime, well, it's going to transport blood and matter from one victim to the next. Therefore, the person with no such transfer, well, they'll probably be the first victim of the crime. And they most likely will pick up DNA from the perp. Because you see, usually in this kind of a killing frenzy, well, the perp or perpetrators will cut themselves, leave their own blood behind. And we do know that some of the people fought back. They may have the killer's DNA under their fingernails. And that DNA, if they find DNA there, if it's not already been matched in databases, well, they can always submit it to Ancestry DNA for possible matches, much like the Golden State Killer was caught in California. Now, they know that the victims were killed by a large knife, and they describe that as like one that was used in the Rambo movie, a military bar-like knife. You see, there are even possible bruises that could have been left on the body with the imprint of that bar of the knife on the victim of the victims. And as we already reported, they have been checking in the area to see if such a knife was sold. Hey, they can also check cell towers to see how many cell phones were tracked coming off the nearby towers, and then check to see if there are any people who maybe would not normally be in that area at that time. They can scrub the social media pages of all the victims. They can and have searched and processed any evidence left behind in the woods there of a possible observation point where someone may have watched and surveilled the house. They may have left evidence behind. And they can and they are already going over surveillance cameras, both from around the crime scene and those cameras going to and from the crime scene. We know that they have already gone over 1,000 plus tips, and they'll continue to go over them coming in from the tip lines. They have interviewed people, by now over 150 people, who may or may not have knowledge that will be helpful. So, my friend, as you can see, there is indeed plenty being done, and plenty more to do and hunt for these vicious killer or killers. You know, I guess this would be a good time to say, if you're in the area or if you know anything whatsoever about this crime that might help in the case, then please call the tip line. The tip line is 208-833-7180. That is 208-833-7180. Or you can go to Tipline at ci.moscow.id.us. Once again, that number is 208-833-7180. 208-833-7180. Now, we're going to list both that number and that link in our show notes. So next week, my friend, we're going to go into the kind of person or persons who likely did this crime. And we're going to keep you updated on the investigation into the Idaho college murders. Let me encourage you, though, stay alert to your own surroundings. As importantly, teach your children to do so as well. Learn to not allow yourself to get so comfortable that you do not teach your inner self to become awakened to danger, or even the possibility of danger around you. During these holiday times, hug your children a little tighter this holiday season. Because, my friend, we all know if they're 2 years of age or they're 20 years of age, they are still our children and the most important people in the world. So until next time, when we continue to discuss the Idaho college student murders, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, stay alert, be safe. For the life you save, well, it may be your very own.